Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sewrena, and in today's video we're going to be making the final Christmas dress of the season, and I am so excited to share the process with you guys. So thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to those of you who celebrate, and Happy Holidays to the rest of everyone else, and Happy Winter for those who don't celebrate anything at all. Today's dress is heavily inspired by a Christmas present. We don't usually exchange gifts anymore because we want to fully immerse ourselves into the holiday spirit and the season. So I decided to make my dress inspired by a classic Christmas gift or present, and I'm really excited with my idea and how it eventually panned out. So if you're interested in seeing that dress and the process and how I got everything done, please continue to watch this video. Also, for more videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, as well as follow me on Instagram at Sewrena_ to see what I'm up to in real time. And if you'd like to support this channel further, please consider leaving a virtual tip on Ko-fi. The link will be in the description below. Now let's get into the pattern and the overall design. For today's pattern, we are going to be sewing up Gertie's new Lana dress pattern. I'll be just using the bodice. I usually do that with her patterns. I just use the bodice and then put whatever skirt I want on it. I wanted to go with the Lana dress pattern because I liked the way that the petals flipped open and it gave that very tearing open to a present effect. Originally, before the Lana dress was released, I was going to use the Liz bodice because it held that shelf bust where I would have been able to put a contrasting fabric on the bra cups to make it also have that torn open effect. So if you don't have the Lana pattern, or if your favorite pattern is the Liz dress, you could also use that bodice for the same effect. Now moving on to the skirt. For the skirt, I decided to go with the lamour skirt or dress pattern and just use the sarong skirt. And the reason I wanted to do with that was because it does overlap, the skirt overlaps, so it also gives that you can tear hair kind of look to it. I wanted to reduce the sarong portion on there so that way it was not too much and you didn't get the full effect and volume of the sarong, because I did want to add another element to the skirt, which would have been a Christmas bow to essentially to mark where you would tear the dress open, or the present open. Essentially, we will not be tearing my dress today. And then after that, to give it another element of the ribbon that usually ties the pattern or the present or the gift together, I wanted to use some buttonholes to thread my gold ribbon through the dress. So after all of this explanation, I want to get into the fabrics that I'm using today. For today's fabric, I'll be using this 100% cotton fabric. It's very shimmery and it reminds me of a red foil wrapping, so I thought this would be perfect for the main portion of the dress. For the contrasting fabric, I'm going with this gold shimmery special occasion material that I also got from Joann's. I'm not sure what the name of this is, but there wasn't very much to purchase, so I got all that I could, which was essentially like a remnant, and I used this for the contrasting bust portion. Finally, we have the gold ribbon to thread through the skirt and to make the Christmas bow detail. And now let's get into the making of this dress. So I wanted to start by showing the outer bodice. I did not film this portion of the video because I was a little confused by the way that the bodice was constructed in the first place. The instructions are very clear, but I like to visualize each step before I do them to reduce the amount of mistakes that I make. And I sat for maybe an hour or more trying to figure out why there were so many pieces. I'm also starting this less than a week away from Christmas, so I just didn't have a whole lot of time to do that. So from here on out, we're going to be starting with the lining, and then we're going to do the skirt. I think the details in this dress that I put in are going to be a little bit more important than the actual dress, so I think it'd be cool to focus more on those details than the making of the entire dress the way that it was instructed to be put together. Here I am sewing the lining. For the lining, I'm using a red poly cotton that I already had in my room, and then I am interlining it with some muslin for some structure. Each of the bodice pieces, both outer and inner, are interlined for structure. So a quick time saving thing that I do is to pin all of my pieces together that I can and sew them up if they don't interfere with the next step. I have my ironing board to the right of me and it's lowered to my height sitting. So all I have to do is turn to my right and press the seams and move on to the next step. The lining of the bodice is pretty easy. As you can see here, I did not baste all of the pieces together because I was running out of time. In the best case scenario, I would not be depending on my pins to keep the lining and the interlining together, but I was very careful to make sure that everything lined up and nothing shifted while I moved. If you're using like a very slippery lining material, then this would not work for you. I usually don't sew patterns I've never used before so close to an important date, but I went after this Lana bodice because it looked simple enough, but looks could be deceiving. This was a very involved pattern, but I absolutely adore the details in the bodice. The little petals make this dress, in my opinion. Despite the complexity of this pattern, I was able to get most of the bodice done in 2 days. So I made these little marks with the chalk to mark where the seam allowance is, so that way I can cut the boning just short of the seam allowance. I am using this sew through boning that I found on Amazon. I didn't realize what it was when I purchased it, and it's definitely wider than I usually prefer my boning to be. In the past when I was using this boning, because I did get quite a bit of it, I was making boning channels, but since you can sew through it, I think I'm going to take the opportunity to do that now. Gertie did not give an exact layout for the boning, but she did leave a suggestion image, and so I'm going to follow her guide for doing that. This will be the first time sewing through the boning, so I'm really excited to give that a try, and I'll let you guys know how that goes and if I'd buy it again. Gertie always recommends that you use steel spiral boning, but that's quite expensive and definitely out of my budget. And since I don't necessarily depend too much on the boning for structure, I use undergarments and things of that nature, I think I'm able to go without it. So I can say with great certainty that it sews pretty well, and I didn't have any issues sewing through the boning at all, and it seems to be holding its structure quite well. So I only have a little bit of this left, and I still haven't decided if I would purchase it again, but it does cut down a lot of time on having to either make the boning channels or sew the boning channels down and then slide the boning through. Now I am attaching the outer bodice to the lining, and I'm taking great care to make sure that those petals are out of the way because I do not want to have to seam rip and then fix that later. So just be very careful the first time. Once the upper edge of the bodice is sewn together, then I go in with an understitch, and the understitch is made so that you don't see the red lining rolling over to the visible side of the bodice. And so I just sew that really closely to the outer fabric, and after that we move on to some buttonholes. These are my test stitches, so I just do one quick test stitch to make sure my ribbon goes through, and once I have everything sewn on, I check to see if the ribbon goes through the test stitch, and it does. So it's time to move on to actually putting the buttonholes on the skirt. I am using my Vintage Singer Professional Buttonholer to make these buttonholes, and I'm starting with the front of the skirt where the sarong is on, and I make about 9 buttonholes evenly spaced on the front of the skirt before I move on to the other 3 pieces, which I will lay out and use the front of the skirt as a reference for the placement on the other pieces. Now I am adding darts to the other skirt pieces. The front does not have a dart where the sarong is, so I'm just going to add those on, and then after those are stitched into place, I'm going to move to the ground to mark out the rest of the buttonholes. My buttonholes are 1.5 inches wide, and that's as wide as the ribbon that I am using. I didn't make any modifications to this pattern. That's one really good thing about Gertie's patterns, that she gives you cup sizes and you have a little bit of customization before you get into the actual garment. So with all the customizations from just cutting the right pattern pieces that I need, I didn't need to do any kind of adjusting after that. The only changes I made to the skirt pattern was to reduce the length of the sarong. I didn't want too much gathering at the waist because I do have a design element that I want to put there, and I didn't want it to be too bulky. Also, I do plan to eventually make an overskirt for this dress, so I do get a full skirt option, and I didn't want the sarong to get in the way underneath that. So without sewing the other pieces, I do overlap my skirt pieces to the seam allowance, and then I go in with the ruler marking each of the distance apart from each other and mark my buttonholes. After this is kind of a sloppy way of me doing it, just to get the holes marked for a little while. And then I go back in and make sure that everything's actually even and the right distance from the hem. Once all the pieces are marked, I put the buttonholes in the very last skirt section, going partial of the way up. I didn't do the entire thing because it was unnecessary. It was going to be covered by the front of the skirt. Now it is time to sew down the center seam of the back of the skirt, making sure to sew just below the notch so that way there is room to put in your zipper. After that, it's time to assemble the remainder of the skirt. So I'm going down the side seams and sewing that up. I have been mentally planning this dress for possibly months now, and I'm so excited to see it finally coming together. After the pieces are sewn, it is time to cut the buttonholes and thread all of your ribbon through to make it look like a Christmas present. So I use a pin to mark off the top of the buttonhole or the end of the buttonhole, so that way when I use my seam ripper I don't cut through the buttonhole, and this makes it really easy. After a couple of these, I go in and just put a pin in each one so I don't have to keep taking them out and moving them per buttonhole. This is the third dress this year where I use buttonholes as a design feature, and I really love how fun they can be. It's definitely more fun to make buttonholes when it is a design function instead of just a closure. Since I have been planning this dress for quite a while now, I originally was going to use the Liz bodice for this dress because the shelf bust would have given a very similar look of the present being unwrapped from the inside, with the gold being the cups. And when I saw Lana released, I completely switched gears and knew that the petals would look like, you know, when you tear the foil wrapping or your wrapping paper off of the present, and I thought it would bring more life to my idea. And so having that bodice paired with the threading of the ribbon on the skirt made it more present and gift-like, but not in a costumey way. Now that most of the dress is made, it's time to move on to the bow, because every cute present has a bow. So I am going to be cutting 8 strips of 10-inch long ribbon to make the bow, and then I think I cut a 5-inch strip to make the center of the bow. So that's what I'm doing here. To assemble the bow, you're going to want to crease the ribbon and find the center, and then you're going to fold each of the ends in opposite directions and pin. I decided to glue my ribbon together, but you can always hand sew this. Also, you might want to burn the ends depending on what type of ribbon you're using, or use some freight check to keep the ends from unraveling. This bow was really quick and easy to do. Once you have everything all stacked, then you're going to use your 1-inch piece and you're going to glue or hand sew that into the center. After that, we're going to move on to how I turn it into a brooch. Here I'm using some red felt and I'm cutting out a little square, which I'm going to turn into a circle for the backing of the brooch. Once this is cut out, I am going to hand sew the brooch back to the back of that felt, and then I'm going to glue it down. Now it's time to put the finishing touches on the dress, and I am sewing the bodice to the skirt. After this, I have some hand sewing to do. I hand sew the lining down, and then I also sew down the facing of the skirt. We are nearing the end of my final Christmas related video, and I want to thank you guys so much for being here. I am so thankful to have had you. Thanks for celebrating with me and supporting me. I've grown so much in this little bit of time. For all those who celebrate, Merry Christmas. And for everyone else, I hope you have a wonderful and safe holiday. And if you celebrate nothing at all, I hope you are having a lovely, safe time to relax, now that a lot of us do have a lot of time off of work and have time to spend time with our loved ones. I know there's been some crazy wild weather here in the US, so I hope you are all safe and warm as well. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, as well as follow me on Instagram at Sewrena_. If you would like to support this channel further, you can do so by leaving a virtual tip on my Ko-fi. The link will be in the description below. And now let's do a get ready with me segment. I want to thank you all for spending your holiday with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to have fun and share my holiday shenanigans with you guys, from building my first gingerbread house from scratch and all of the other little crafts in between. It's been a pleasure to share with you and hear all about your Christmas traditions and the fun things that you guys have planned this year. It was really fun to share this with you guys and see what you guys were up to for the holiday. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a New Year's dress, or I might just make the overskirt for this dress and wear it on New Year's. But if that is the case and I have time to make something, I might share a couple snippets or clips of the making of that garment. But if I do not, and this happens to be the last video of the year, I want to say Happy New Year to you all, and I look forward to creating and sharing with you next year. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.